Alright, so while I've got the timing cover off, one thing that I find essential to change, because my stock one, which I'll give you a close up of soon, that stretched and was slapping on the timing cover after not much time at all. I don't know whether it's because it was just an old chain or whether the boost actually did that as well, but I definitely advise going to a double row Rollmaster timing chain without a tensioner. So these are pretty basic. You've just got to make sure that you get the right one to suit your engine number, because some of the earlier models have a slightly different ball crank. So I'll show you guys now how I do it anyway, to undo the cam pulley, get rid of that. We'll take off the balance shaft pulley as well, because that needs to be removed to fit the extra width of this double row on there. And yeah, so this is obviously off my old motor, but for you guys you'll have a brand spanking new one, not covered in oil. Same principle. So okay, so for this you might actually need a cheater bar, which slides on here just to give you that bit of extra leverage. But you basically need a 1 1/8 socket for the camshaft bolt and a 24mm for the harmonic balancer or crank pulley bolt. So what I like to do, this is what I found the easiest, I just wind it in and get that nice and tight. Get your cheater bar on here and basically just it's obviously a lot easier if you've got two people, but there you go. So you can hear that crack, so that's now loose. So now when it comes time to getting the crank pulley bolt back out, sometimes if you've got an air rattle gun, obviously you can probably rattle that back out. I'm going to give this a go. I can't remember how I did it last time, but we'll see how this goes. Perfect. Alright, so the next thing you want to do once those bolts are off is you'll notice that there is a dot on the outside edge here of the cam chain. So you want to basically rotate the motor around till that is in line with the dot on the face of this crank sprocket. I'll put a photo on the screen for you guys who can't see what I'm pointing to. So then once they are, you know, lining up very plumb, very perpendicular, just get your screwdriver, stick it down here, and then just unwind that crank pulley bolt without rotating those pulleys. And the next thing you can do is get rid of this stupid tensioner. These are shit. And then literally just throw it in the bin. So what I also like to do, just to make sure, because once you got these pulleys off, you got no recollection of where it was. Just get a rag, bit of wax and grease remover, just wipe the faces of the pulleys. And then I also like to just put a texture mark just to double check and just to make sure, because you don't want to mess this timing up, otherwise you've got to do this whole job again and it could be catastrophic. So now, without moving anything, you simply just want to slide these off like so. And be sure not to lose the little woodruff pin that's on the crank, on the cam. So this one seems to be sticking in, which is good. I remember the first time I did this on my other motor, it fell out and it was a prick to find. Now it's also probably a good time to get the gasket scraper and scrape off all this timing cover gasket without these pulleys in here. Just be careful not to bump either crank or cam. So I'm going to do that now quickly. Alright, so with that all sorted, you've got your marks, they're all aligned. The only thing left to do before we can put the new pulleys on, or sprockets, is we've got to get rid of this balance shaft, pulley, sprocket and bolt, etc. So what I usually do is get rid of your lifter retainer and then jam like a strong kind of screwdriver. Actually, you know what, it's probably even better to put it closer to where the bolt is, so it's got less torsional kind of. So I'm hoping that I can just break it like so. Yep. So that's all there is to it. Just that little sprocket, and you just leave that off. And now we're ready to put the timing chain on. Alright, so with this, it's obviously pretty basic. Same again, you just want to line up your marks so you can see the dots there and there. If you're lucky like me and your little Woodruff key has stayed in the camshaft, yeah, that's a lot easier. If not, you've got to make sure that you put it in here in this little keyway. So, because this has come out of the car and it's been sitting on the bench, I'm just going to inspect for any debris. It looks all good. I'm in a pretty clean workshop. And then it's just a matter of getting the marks lined up. And then you've just got to slot it through the appropriate keyway. Alright, so because it's such a tight fit, I've actually got the old sprocket, and I'm just literally tapping this on just to the point where I can get this chain lined up and the cam pulley is just about ready to go. Alright, finally got that started. You know, it's just a matter of playing around with the I guess the alignment of that chain. Because it's such a tight double row, it doesn't allow you much flex. So you got to kind of get the pulley sitting true with the shaft. So now I can just kind of tap that back like so. And now we are all lined up. So we've got our mark just there, our mark just there. We're on, we've got our little pin in the keyway. We're obviously on the keyway here. So now we're good to basically put the cam bolt back in, torque it up, Loctite it, whatever. And yeah, basically good to put this whole timing cover back on. Alright, so we're just going to put this bolt back in, bit of thread locker, and then torque it up to about 200 Newton meters. Alright, so when it comes to tightening, this is what I like to do. Hopefully you can see that. 2 old flywheel bolts in the back of the crank there, and get the screwdriver and just kind of jam it on the engine stand, and then you just got to torque it down. Alright, so another thing you're going to need when you're running the double row timing chain is a machined oil pump flange or backing plate. So this is from Mace. I also got their upgraded oil pump while I was at it. So if you don't want to do this, you can use say like a double thickness gasket to kind of space the timing cover off, but it's easier just to do all this. So you know, reinstalling this is pretty simple. These literally just drop in here like so. I always like to put a bit of oil in there like so. So the manual actually says to pack this with petroleum jelly just to help get oil pressure as soon as you start it, but I'm going to actually prime the motor by starting it once it's in the car anyway, so I'm not going to bother doing that. So then all you're going to do is just put your plate, obviously countersunk side up, on like so. It only goes one way, and then you get your bolts, tiny bit of thread locker, and then these are torqued up to 10 Newton meters. Just time to put this back on the car basically. I'm going to use the factory paper gasket, but I'm going to spray it with some copper coat both sides just to ensure I've got a perfect seal. And then before putting it on, just rub some oil on the inside of this main seal here, which I'll add. I also put a new one on. So for those of you who's using an old motor, definitely worth putting new seals in everywhere you can. Alright guys, so heads are done, pretty much everything is done, and I've touched on everything you need to do, except one last thing, the sump. So obviously because you're going to a turbo setup, you need to have a turbo oil return line in the sump. So this is the sump off the second-hand motor I got. I've decided to change my setup from the one that I did have. As you can see, I've got the dash 10 AN fitting welded on there, and I've also done a nifty little thing like the Subarus have, and I'm sure a lot of other factory turbo manufacturers do, is actually drop the oil back down inside the oil level so it's not frothing on top and getting picked up by the crank. So you can also see that I've welded a nice BBG stainless tag on there. I had to do something cool with it, so why not? So yeah, I'll just give it a fresh lick of paint, and now I'll give you guys a quick rundown on how I like to do my sump gaskets. I'll give you one thing straight up: don't use the cork ones. The rubber ones are okay, but even this one came with a rubber one and it was still leaking. So RTV is a go, but use it sparingly. So I'll show you guys how to do it. I did the same thing with my Subaru, so it's a more in-depth one if you want to watch that in an earlier video, but let's get started on this. So first of all, and I always say this, you want to get your surfaces as clean as possible. So like usual, wax and grease remover, microfiber towel, give it a couple of goings over and you'll be right to go. Alright, so this is the stuff that I use. It's worked very well in the past. As I've said, I've used every type of gasket. The best is RTV in my opinion, so that's what I'm going to be using here. But you want to use it sparingly. You want enough to basically come up and over these ripples here, because that will obviously bottom out on the bottom of the block. So you need enough to be able to stay between them when they bottom out, but you don't want too much so it all oozes out in here. So let's do it. Okay, so with that done, now you just want to go around any of the bits that are close to the inside of the sump. You just want to kind of chamfer them back like that, so that when they push out, basically, it doesn't want to push so much into the sump. So now it's as simple as putting it on and trying to get it lined up perfectly first go, so that you don't kind of move your RTV around the surface here. And I forgot to mention, you also want to check that your oil pickup's clean before you do this. Mine's all good, so we're good to go. Alright, so we're looking good. What I'm going to be doing, which I don't think the manual says to do this, but last time I actually had this off and then put it back on with RTV, I noticed when I had it on the hoist last time doing the clutch, the bolts had worked a little bit loose and I was slowly seeping oil. So what I'm going to do this time is put some Loctite on every single bolt, and I think this is the third time I've done it now. I think this is going to be the perfect way to do it. So yeah, what we're going to do now is put the bolts in, I'm going to Loctite them and then torque them to about 12-15 Newton meters. Alright, so the last finishing touch for my sump is I'm going to put a nice, if it'll focus, hello, a nice anodized red magnetic sump plug in it, just because, you know, any bits of metal you want to be sticking on that, not going into the motor. So and it comes with a nice aluminium crush washer, so winning. Oh. Alright guys, so you can see that I've just about got the motor built back up again. Hallelujah. So I think another thing I'll touch on quickly is just injector choice. Let me set this tripod up. There we go. Alright, so previously I was running these Bosch 42 pound an hour injectors. We found that they ran out of fuel on 10 pound of boost at about 4,500 RPM with 2 degrees of timing. So the further you take the timing up, obviously the more fuel you're going to use because the more efficient the combustion is. So I'm moving to some actually Ford XR6 turbo injectors, some Siemens 80 pound an hour injectors, which are pretty affordable. I think you can get them for under 200 bucks brand new. And Ben has calculated they will flow, I think, pretty good for about 20 odd pound of boost, 350, close to 400 kilowatts. And I'll also touch on when Ben was here the other day when we were looking at what killed the motor, which was actually one of these, ironically. Some of the remnants being in my hand there, which you can see in the previous video on the autopsy. But basically he was saying, he was thinking in his head, why we run out of injector at such a low kind of area where it should be flowing more. And the reason why is because on these, the VR-V6 manuals, basically the injectors are batch fire. So the amount of time they have between each firing cycle is slim to none, especially as you're getting into boost. So that's why, basically, I'll get Ben to explain it next time I see him, but that is for anyone wondering, that is the reason why they didn't flow that much. I'm going to chuck these Siemens 80 pounders in. We can put the rail back on the manifold, and we're just about ready to bolt this engine back in the car. So for those of you who don't know, obviously these clips go on, they snap around the injector, so he's got to pull them off. Then the injector will just pull out. And make sure you bring the O-ring with it, you don't want to have that stuck in the boss. Okay, so these are the injectors, brand new. These are what Ben runs in his supercharged L27. So these are good. This is what we put in the car when we actually ran out of injector on the dyno, except one of these went missing and it turned out it went into the engine somehow. I don't know how, but anyway, you just want to, I always just put a bit of petroleum jelly and you just slap her in like that. Alright, she's ready to go back on the car. Holy shit guys, so new motor is in, all built up as you've probably seen in the previous videos. We're literally about ready to fire it up. We're going to prime the oil first obviously, and then hopefully it fires into life. The only thing we've got to do is, as you can see over here, the one last to-do item is flash the ECU. So I'm just going to do that real quick. We're done. So,
I thought you were going to pull your pants down.
No, it's only a
just a mild flash.
Mild flash. Alright, no, let's really do it. Which computer do I want? This one. Alright.
So the heart transplant is completed.
Almost. Well, it's done. As long as it runs, it's great success.
So with this flash, what exactly are you doing?
So Ben has written me basically the fueling that we had on the dyno. He's written that. So we've got the same tune that we had on the dyno, which is fueling pretty much all down. All he's done is just changed it because I put the 850cc injectors in.
Yep.
So it's basically just so the car will start and run, and it should theoretically be fine all throughout the rev range, but Ben's coming around tomorrow and we're going to go do a street tune in it if everything's good. So yeah, I just got to download the file that he sent me on the email last night, and then I'll just literally flash it on the ECU via the NVRAM board. So I'm going to actually get Ben to do a video on how the whole ECU setup works, so stay tuned for that. And the next time I see you, we'll be firing this up and hopefully it works. Alright guys, so we've just disconnected the ECU fuse from the engine bay, so that will allow us to crank the car without firing, fuel pump or spark. So we're just going to do that, crank it round, hopefully get oil pressure, and then we'll plug it back in, then we should be right to fire it up. Hopefully no weird noises. I think we're ready to fire it up. Do you want to plug that fuse back in and we can cross our fingers and toes and I'll just prime the fuel system a few times. Right, here we go. I think it's either the idle air control valve's still trying to adjust or it's flooded. I'll start up again and see. Alright, so I'm not going to start it anymore. It's already like 8 o'clock at night, and it's obviously running pig ridge. It's going to fill the whole workshop up with black smoke. So I'm just going to wait for Ben tomorrow, and then as long as there's no leaks or anything, he can dial in the idle, get it all running. I got a feeling the plugs might be saturated in fuel. That's why they're not firing properly, and it's kind of running really lumpy. As you heard, it fired up and ran. Once the oil pressure got to everything, it ran pretty well. So yeah, I'm pretty confident. Everything sounded good, solid cranks, consistent cranks, so we got good compression across all cylinders. I'm just going to put it up on the hoist before we head off, check for any oil leaks, because I've changed the turbo drain and a few other little things here and there, so I'm pretty confident it'll be sweet. But I said that last time with the dyno and look where we are. So anyway, yeah, I think we better bail.